So this is 100% customized AI chatbot that uses a ChatGPT to give me healthy and simple desserts according to the ingredients I have. So if I type here, I have eggs, milk, and chocolate, and I send it, then the response will be a simple recipe. So let's see how to build this app from scratch without a single line of code using Nowa.
So let's start by dropping an empty screen, and I will call it home screen. All right, nice. So now the next step is I want to have a background image to the screen. Now, of course, I can just come to the scaffold and give it a color, but if I want to have an image, then I need to do something different. So I will set back the color to be white as it was before. And then I'm gonna use something called wrapper. So what is a wrapper? A wrapper is simply a widget that has one child. So here you can see the padding, which has one child. The container has one child. All the widgets here are widgets that have only one child. So I want to have the container. But why do I even want the container? Because the container has an image. So I can have the container to show an image. And then I can have this container in the background. And this is how I can have a background image for the screen. So now I have the image. I want to add an image by clicking plus. And then I have two options. I can choose network, or I can upload an image from my files, which is what I want. So I pick an image, and well, I already uploaded this image before, so I can see it here. All right, we did add the image, but nothing happened. Why is that? This is because how wrappers work. So to explain better, so this is, let's say the part here is the core of this selection. So like if we select the screen, the group here or the layout is the core of the screen. Now everything here is a wrapper to it. So the scaffold is a wrapper to the group. And then the container is a wrapper to the scaffold. Means that the container comes above the scaffold and the scaffold comes above the group. Now, if you want to always see in action, what does that mean? Just go to files and click on show file content. Here you can see the code. So you can see that the container here is above the scaffold, and the scaffold is like above the stack, which is the layout in this case. So this is why we cannot see the image, because the container is above the scaffold, which is our screen. So what do we need to do is simply reorder the wrappers. So I want to have the container to be above the scaffold, and then I can see the image, because now the container is below the scaffold. So everything, so when you add, let's say if you add a new wrapper, it will be added in the bottom of the list, but in reality, it's above everything you had before. So nice. Let's say now we have the background set, all good. So next step, I want to have the up bar. I want to have the up bar and the color. Nope, I don't want it to be white. So I will, let's say I'll pick black. And when you click on this small button here, you jump to the widget. So like this, the up bar has a title property, and the title is connected to a widget. So if you click on this one, now you are inside the widget, which is a title. So now we can control the title. So I want to call it something. Let's say, ask me for a recipe. Nice. We cannot see it because it's black. So let's change the color to white. And I want to set actually a font. So let's say, yes, I like this one. And then, you know what? I'm going to make it nicer. I will even add an emoji. So yeah, a burger. It's actually a good idea. So now we have the up bar set. Nice. Now the next step is I want to drop everything I need on the screen. So we need two things mainly on the screen. We need the list view that will have all the bubbles of the chat. So I will add it here. And then I need to have the section in the bottom, on the bottom, that have the button itself, which is send, and then the text field that I will write the message to. So I'm gonna drop the button let's say, and I'm going to drop the text field. And then, so I have the 3 items that I need on the screen. That's it. But now let's start to set up the layout. So the button, which I will use to send the message, and the text field, gonna be a row because they will be always next to each other. So I can group them together by selecting both of them, and then I can click Command or Control G. And now, if you look here on the left side, you will see that both became in a group. So let's bring it outside for you to see clearly. So now they are inside a group, but this group is a stack. What does a stack mean? A stack means that I can move things freely. So I can move the button freely, I can move the text field freely. But actually I want them to be always next to each other in a row. So to do that, just come to this to the details panel and change the layout from stack to a row. And then now they will become a row. So if you actually, let's say, switch them, they will always be next to each other. And then, all right, let's just bring it back here. So now we have a row, we have list view, but I always want the row and the list view to be above each other. This means that I want them to be in a column. But this is actually the main screen layout. So every screen has their own layout. So let's say by default, a screen is a stack because you can move things freely inside a screen. But if you want to make the screen a column, you can simply click here, and then everything inside the screen will be above. Like every widget you have inside will be above the other because the main layout became a column. So what happened here? So what happened here is how Flutter actually works. So before we changed the main layout of the screen to be a column, it was a stack. And the container that was above the stack was expanded to the whole screen. This is because the stack itself, by default, inside Nowa, have the fet to fill the screen, to be expanded. But now we change it to a column, and the column, they have actually a special property that they resize themselves to be as long as their children. So now we have this row, and we have the list view, and we have some space between. So the column doesn't have to be all the screen long. It just can be enough to have those 2 children. So the simple way to change that is literally to make one of the children inside the group have an expanded height. So now, if you think about it, you want always the list view here to always take all the space left. And then the row here will always have a fixed height. So to do that, just come back to the text field, to the list view, and set the height to be expanded. I want also the width to be expanded. Now, what does this mean is that it will take all the space all the time. But now there's a space between them, and this is because in the layout, I have a fixed space, so I'm gonna maybe make it 10. So now if you see, they're actually closer to each other. So what does happen if you resize the screen? Now you will see that the list view is always growing to fit the screen width. And also, I'm just going to bring it back. And also, if you change the height, the list view always take the rest of the space. Let's go back to the before. But now, okay, just go back to this. Yep, now it works. So now let's just fix the layout here a little bit. So I want the width to be expanded. And here, if you can see, well, there was something wrong. The thing is, let's now do the same thing as we did to the main column to do it in the row here. So for the row, you always want the text field to take all the space in the width. So you choose the text field, and then in the layout, make it expanded. So now, again, if you resize, you will see that, let's resize the screen. You will see that the text field is always taking the rest of the space. So now this is how you make actually your design responsive. So now, all right, we have the text field here, we have the button here, but they are actually very close to the border of the screen. So let's just add some padding. So let's go back to the home screen and add padding. Now we will see that actually, well, it doesn't look as what we wanted. And again, this is because of the wrappers and because the order matters. So a padding in the top means that the padding is above the scaffold and it's above the container. Now, this is not what we want. We want to have the padding inside actually here. And then when this happens, like you have the spacing inside the screen, not outside the screen. So this is why always the order of the wrappers matters. But now let's set let's say left and right, make it 2020. So now we will see that yes, there is now more space here. And also on the list view, you will find out there is space also here. Now we can also add a padding to this row and a padding to the list view, but it's easier to just add a padding to the whole screen and then it will be applied to all the children. Good. So now we are done with the first step. Okay, so now let's actually work on the bottom part of the app, which is this row. Let's make it look better than that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to play with the layout a little bit. So if you actually choose a text field, you will find out that its height is not actually good. So I want to change that. So if you go to the layout option, I can give it a fixed number. Let's say I'm going to give it 60. But what I'm going to do is something else. I'm going to actually set the height to be auto. And this actually allows the system to set an automatic height for the row, for the text field. And usually it's the smallest number that it needs. So with this, if you see now the selection is as small as the text field itself, which is exactly what auto does. And now for the button, let's play with that. So I will change the text to be sent, and I want to change the color for it. And I actually have a color already copied, which is the one that I want to use in this application. So now I have it, and I want to change the height a little bit. So I can, of course, change it from the layout, or I can change it by just like resizing the widget itself. And now let's actually see. Now I also want the two items inside the row to have an alignment which can be on the bottom left. So if you go to the alignment after you select the row and you click on the bottom left, now the two items will be actually aligned there. So then if you see that the height of the row itself now, it's actually more than it needs. So as before, we can change that to be auto, and then the height of the row will be exactly as like the minimal as needed, which is exactly the height of like the biggest element of the text field or the bottom. All right, so now let's see how it looks like. Okay, good. So the first thing you might notice here that you might ask me why there is a space here below the row, but on the border there is no space. And this is because of something called safe area. So if you select the screen itself, you will see something called safe area. So let's see here. What is that? So safe area is actually something from Flutter that it adds a padding around the screen to avoid interacting with the UI elements of the system itself, like Android or iOS. So let's say if in iPhone X, there's a notch in the top, you don't want your app to actually interact with this notch. So you want it to be in a safe area. So you want to have a little padding on the top. The same thing for Android. Let's say for some devices, they have the bottom navigation bar inside the screen. So you don't want your application to override them. So this is what safe area does. So if I remove the bottom from the safe area here and you click on play, then you will see that there is no padding here anymore. But for me, I'm just going to keep it. So I'm always going to be in the safe. All right, so now the most thing we need to do right now is actually set up the text field itself, because it looks way off than what we want. So the first thing I want to do here, let's actually resize, is I want to add a decoration. So when you see something in Nowa that has the plus button next to it, it means that there's no object set for this property. And when you click on plus, you actually add an object to it. So now I added a decoration object. So let's actually start playing with that. First thing first, the label text. So the label text is a text that's going to appear in the text field before we type. And while we type, it will just go to the top. So let's see how this is actually will look like. So I'm going to write a label text, which is write something. And I also want to add a style object for it. So I want the color for this label to be white, but this is too strong, so I'm going to make it 70% here. So yeah, if you click on play, you will see here the label, and when you select the text field, then it will go to the top. So okay, this is the first step. The second thing I want to do actually is I want to make the text field filled. So I can select this property here, and then I want to choose a color for the filling. So I choose white, I'm gonna make it 20%, so it looks nicer. So yeah, this is how now it looks like. All right, so now what I also want to do is to add a border around it. And I have three things here. I have enable border, focus border, and disable border. So enable border is a border that will appear before the user clicks on the text field, before it's focused. Now, when the user clicks on the text field, then the focus border is the one that's going to actually show. And the disabled border will show only if the text field is not enabled, but it's not the topic of this case at least. So I want to add an outlined border for the text field. And here I see that there's no border side object. So if I click on the plus, now there is an object which is it indicates the side. So now if you look at the text field, you will see the black color as a border for it. But I actually want to change it as well. So I'm gonna change it to white. I think I love white a little bit too much here. And I also want to set radius for it. So now it has a white border, it has a radius, it looks nice. So now if I click here, what happened is the border changes from the enabled border to the focus border. So let's go back again and also add a focused border. So I'm gonna choose also to make it outlined, and I'm gonna add a border side object, and I actually will choose the same color I choose for the button, which is this one. I'm gonna add also radius. So now if you click on the text field, you will see the color, the border changed to be this orange color, but the radius is like 16, which is the same as the enabled color, the enabled border. Okay, awesome. So what do we need to do also? Of course, we need to add a style object for the text that you type. Because now if you see here, it's actually, yeah, the text is black. So I want to change this to make it white. And also I saw the cursor is black, so I'm gonna also change it to be white. So now, yep, now it's actually looks amazing. But there's a problem here. If you see, if you just write one line and you click enter, then nothing happens because you can only type one line. And this is because of a property here called maximum lines. So here I set 1 as a maximum lines, means that the user cannot have more than one line. But actually it's a chat, so I'm gonna go for like maybe 10. But what's gonna happen here is the height will change again. Why is that? because the height was auto. So again, as auto actually means that the height will be resized to be the lowest possible. And now, because we have 10 lines, so the height has to change to cover those 10 lines. But this is not something I want. So in this case, I don't want to make it auto. I actually want to resize it manually. And maybe I actually want to give it a height. So I'm gonna give it maybe 60, or let's say 50. Actually, I'm gonna keep it 60, and also I'm gonna change the height of the button to be 60. So let's see. Yeah, I think I will prefer this more, but I think there's a lot of space between both of them. So if I go to the row itself, I want to make the space here 20. So now they are actually closer to each other. And what's going to happen, because the text field is expanded in the width, the text field is the one that's going to grow to cover the space here, but just leave like 20 pixel here for the spacing. So now I think that's good. And now if you click enter, you'll see that you can write actually multiple lines in the text field, which is up to 10, which is exactly how we want. Amazing. So now we are ready. We have the layout ready for the whole screen. So now let's start to plan the logic of it. All right, so now let's actually start playing with the bubble, the chat bubble that we will show inside the screen. So the first thing for the chat bubble, we need the text widget, and this text widget will hold who is the sender. So it can be the user, it can be the assistant. And I want to drop a markdown widget, and this will hold the message itself. Now, the reason I want to choose a markdown is because I want the response or the message to have a nice format. If I use a text widget again for the message itself, it can work, but the response will always have the same text style. But if I set a markdown widget and then I tell ChatGPT to always reply in a markdown format, I will have the response always formatted in a nice way, which is nice in this case. So now to create the bubble, first of all, those two items will be grouped together. So again, select them both and then Command or Control G, and they will actually be always in a column because they will always be above each other. And then let's change the alignment to make it to the top left. And actually just I want to remove the header from the markdown, just make it look like a normal text. And of course we want to have a background image for the bubble. So to do that, we always go to the same thing, which is a wrapper of the container. So the container wrapper, because it has the color property, it has the image property. If you want to add an image or add a color background, we always use the container wrapper. And now if you see, actually there is no space between the text itself and the container. So we simply need just to add, be sure that you're selecting the group, and then simply just add padding wrapper. Now if you see, the padding is outside now, it's like outside the container, but we want it to be between the container border and the text. So we need to drag the padding wrapper to make it above the container here. So in code, it will be actually, the container will be, like the padding will be the child of the container. So then the padding will be inside the container. Because always remember, in the details here, the core widget is in the top, and then the one below it is its wrapper, and the one below that, it's wrapper. So like now we have a column, the wrapper of the column, the first one is the padding, and above the padding there's a container. And this is why it looks like this right now. Okay, that's good. So now what do we also need to do? Maybe I want actually to make the distance between them less. I'm gonna make it 5. Actually, let's actually change the layout a little bit here to make it like a little bit like a chat bubble at least. We want to change the layout to the text. So I'll move it a little bit bigger. I'm gonna make a random layout for now, and later we will see if we have to change something. And I think just something quick. Maybe I want to change the font size. No, that's too much. Maybe 12 12, say 13 is good. Maybe change the font. Okay, that's enough. Maybe also the radius a little bit. So if you choose a radius here, you can add a radius for all of the border. If you click on this button, you can add a radius for a specific corner, which we actually will have to use later. But now we'll just keep it for all of all the corners. Okay, so now the next step. Now we created the UI of the bubble, but now to be able to reuse it inside, we have to create a component out of this. So to do that, click here and then create a component. I will call it the message or message bubble. So the reason we created a component is because later we want to have multiple instances of this chat bubble. So like with every message, you want to have an instance of this message bubble UI, and with every instance, you want it to show a different message. So this is why you create a component. One, because you can have multiple instances of the same UI, and if you change anything in the component UI, it will change in all the message bubbles here, because all the instances will go back to the same UI. And the second reason is because we want to create a parameter inside this bubble, because we want to be able to pass the chat message itself to the bubble when we show the bubble here. So, and we cannot do that unless we have a screen or a component. So now, because we created a component, now we can see here we can add a parameter or a variable. Okay, nice. So now what's the next step? The next step is we will deal with the data. We will now start to see how we will inject the message data into this UI. So the first thing, we have to create a type. Now I can create here simply two parameters. One that will hold the message itself and connect that parameter with the markdown widget, and the other one can hold who is the sender. But I can do something more professional. I can create a chat message object, and this object will act as an envelope that will hold those two informations. And this also will make it easy for me, because later if I create a list of the messages that I will show, instead of creating two lists, I can create one list only for that would be a list of this chat message object. So let's actually start to implement this so you will understand better later what I'm talking about. So go to Files and click on Add and then choose New Object. And then I'm going to call it message or chat message object. So this object will hold the information of a single chat message. Now, if you click on it as a normal class in code, you'll see that this object or this type will have functions and parameters. Now, those are the default functions. We don't actually need them now, but let's talk about the parameters. So now we will create a parameter called message, and this will hold the text message itself. And of course, the type will be string. And I want it to have a default value. So let's call it default message. And the reason I need a default value is because when I am in the UI designer, what I'm going to see is always the default value, because I still didn't click on play, so I don't have the actual messages. So what I'm going to see in the UI is the default value. So it's always nice to have a default value so you can see something, so it will not be empty. Later we will see exactly what do I mean by or why default value is important. Now the next parameter is I want a way to establish the difference between a message sent from the user and a message sent from the system. Now logically I can do this with multiple ways, but the easiest one is to create a boolean that is called, let's say, is user sender, and change the type to make it boolean. Now what this gonna do is, this is a boolean, so this is true or false. And if this chat message object had a true value for this parameter, means that this message came from the user. If it has a false value, then this message came from the system. Now you might ask me, why do even I need that? because in the UI, I might need to change things according to who is the sender. Maybe I want to show the text, the title of the bubble, like here, for example. This one, the title here, I want it to be different between a message sent from the user or the system. Maybe the background image. Maybe later also the radius. I want the radius to change according to who sent the message. So the message appears actually that it was sent from the right side or the left side. Later we will see that. But now we created this parameter and oops, wait, we actually deleted it by mistake. So here's user sender. Again, Boolean. And I'm gonna keep the default value as true, so that the user is the sender. So let's go back here. And now I want to create a parameter inside this component, which is a bubble. So the parameter will be called, let's say, message or chat message param. So this will be a parameter for the chat message, and the type of this parameter gonna be the same type we created, which is the chat message object. And then you will see that here you will have a default value for this parameter, which is now the default value of the parameters inside the type itself or the object itself, which are like the default message and the sender is true. So I will keep it like that. So now to wrap it up, we created a type or an object that will hold the message and the sender. This is only an envelope that will hold the parameters. It has nothing to do with the UI. But then here, we created a parameter called chat message parameter, so we can pass data to this bubble. Now, the data we want to pass is a data from the type chat message object. So every data we will pass to this message has to be an object of this chat message object. This is why the type of this parameter is chat message object. So this means that this parameter, you can only pass an object from that type, which is chat message object, to this bubble or to this component. Okay, so now the next step is, now we have the parameter. So now the steps is like this. The first thing is Nowa will render. Nowa will actually bring the data, and then it will inject the data inside the message bubble and will show the message bubble in the list, and then it will actually use the data from that parameter inside the bubble itself. So now if we go back again to the text widget here, let's start with the markdown. So the data here, what's that going to be? This data will be the message itself, right? So to connect the data property here to the message here, we have to do this. So we click on the data itself, and then we go to locals, because we created the parameters inside this bubble. So it's a local value of this bubble. So we can find it in the locals, and then we will see what's inside that parameter. And since the parameter is from the type chat message object, we can see the parameters created inside the message object, which is like is user sender and also the message. So I want the message. So now if you see here, you can see that the default message appears now on the bubble, because now if we actually change that to like default message 2, this will actually change, because now the value of the markdown is connected to the message inside the parameter chat message parameter. Now we can just keep it like that. Okay, now let's go to the text widget. And this, it's a little bit not straightforward. Why? Because here I always needed to show the message itself. That's it. But here I want this text to be user, if the sender was a user. And then I want it to be the system or the assistant, if the sender was the assistant. I cannot simply write here user, because then it will always be user. I also cannot write assistant because it will always be assistant. And I cannot connect it to a variable because it will always be fixed. So what I need is this. I need to calculate the value of this text property that it shows user when the user is the sender and shows assistant when the ChatGPT is the sender of the message. So because we have now different scenarios, I don't want to pass like a fixed data or like a value for this text. I want to pass a logic. And this logic will actually be used when the bubble is rendered to calculate what is the value to show here. So to create a logic for the text, now we go to this option, which is compute. When you click on compute, Nowa will automatically create a function that is connected to this property. This means that the value of this property, the text, will be actually computed by this function, and it's not a fixed value. So now to actually modify the logic here in the function, click on it and then open in Circuit. So now what we see is that it will always just, when the logic is called, it will return assistant, because we had before we connect the function, the text here was assistant, so it created a function out of what we had before. But this is not what we want. So let's delete that. Actually, let's just make it bigger. So I want to have an if statement. And then I want to access the Boolean we created before. So now if you just click on right click and click on locals, you can access the local variables and the parameters, which is, one of them is chat message param, which is a parameter inside this bubble. And inside the parameter, which is from type chat message object, there is the other parameter, which is user sender. Now, because it's yellow, it means that this is Boolean and the condition is Boolean, so both are yellow, so I can simply connect them because they are the same type. So now we have an if statement that says if the Boolean, which is user sender, which is inside the parameter, is true, what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna return that the sender is the user. And actually I can create, let's say, have like a nice emoji here. And else I'm gonna click on return and write assistant. And maybe also I'm gonna add a robot. So now this logic is this. If the user is the one who sent the message, then the value of that text will be user. Otherwise, it will be the assistant. So this is how we can actually change that text depending on the value. And now we can see it's user. Why? Because the default value is true. So if we change this to false, it will automatically update. But it doesn't matter, to be honest, now what's the default value, because this will be set when we play the app itself. So I'm just going to keep it true. Now, the next thing is, in this screen, to be able to render those bubbles here, first, I need to have a list that will hold the values of the chat messages itself. So I will have a list of the chat message object. So this list will have multiple objects. And then what's going to happen is that the list view will convert each object inside the list to a bubble. So first thing first, let's create a variable inside the... Now, you might notice this is text. This is actually created automatically when you drop the text field, and because with this actually variable, you can actually access the text in the text field. We will see later why, but then let's continue of creating a list called message list. And the type of this list will be chat message object. And by default, actually I want to... No, wait, we did a mistake. This should be a list of chat message object. And by default, let's say I want to have 2 chat messages. And I don't care about the default value for now. Okay, so now we have a list that will hold instances of this chat message object. And then I want the list view to convert this list into bubbles. To do that, you go like the purpose of the list view is literally to convert data, like the list of the chat message object, to a UI element. So because we always want the same UI element that the message bubble, but we have a different message objects, then we need to do this. So the first thing is we can click on we can use the children property here and connect it to the message list. So this means that the list view will go to this message list and convert every item inside the list to an UI element using a single component. So now the component is a placeholder. So now it automatically created two placeholders because the list had two items, which was a default, the value we choose for the list. So, but I don't want this ugly placeholder. I want the bubble to be the placeholder. So then I can just come to the placeholder inside the list view and click on replace. And then I can choose the message bubble. Okay, so now let's take a breath and actually wrap up what happened. So first of all, you have to know that the list view always has one placeholder. And usually you will see that under the list view in the outline, you will only find always one item, even if here there's two items, because this is the placeholder that the list view uses for every item in the property here, in the children property. So because the children property is connected to the message list, and the message list has two items inside, the list view renders two instances from the placeholder, which is a message bubble, for every item in the children property. So if you remember, before we created the message list that holds instances from the chat message object, and we created two objects inside the list as the default value. Okay, so now what I expect that if I changed the value of one of the objects, let's say we change the first one to hey, I expect that the text here will also change. But this did not happen. But even though like the list view is connected to the list, to the message list. So if I change an object inside the message list, I expect that the value here will also change. Okay, so if you actually, like if you wonder about anything using Nowa, always it's a good idea to take a look to the code. So if you go to the code to see what's happening now, you will see that we have now the list view and we are mapping the message list, and from every element we are creating an instance from the message bubble. But we are not passing anything to the message bubble. There's no data going on. The element here is not going inside the message bubble. So the message bubble had to create the view using the default value that it has. Okay, so now what's happening is literally that the list view is rendering instances from the message bubble in the same number as the items in the children property here, but it's not yet passing every child inside the list to its own bubble. This is not happening yet. So how we can do that? Okay, to do that, choose the placeholder here, or you can also click it inside the list. And here we have the chat message parameter. And if you remember, when we created the message bubble component, we created a parameter, and this parameter from the type chat message object, because we said we want to pass a chat message object to this bubble so we can render the message. So now here we will use that. So now if you go to the detail now, we will see that, okay, now here is the parameter for the component here for the instance, but it's not connected to anything, so now it uses the default value. So if we click on it and we go to locals, we will find something that wasn't there before called element. So element is a variable created by the list view itself, which holds the item of the list that's passed to that instance of the placeholder. So now if we choose the element, now we can see that the text here changed. And also if we go back again to the list, and let's say we change the boolean here, we can see that actually the sender changes. And the same thing if we do this for the second object. And also if we say hey again, also we can see that it now changes. So now if we go back again to the code, you will see the difference. You will see that now we are not just creating the message bubble, we're also passing the element which is taken from the list to the chat, to the message bubble, using the parameter we created before. And because the element, which is from the list, it's from the same type as a parameter, which is the chat message object, we could pass the element to the message bubble. Okay, so now what's happening is this. The list view is like anything under the list view have access to an extra variable because it's under the list view in the tree. So for its scope, it can access the element variable, which is created by the list view for every item. So now, because now we're selecting this placeholder, which is one of the items in the list, and we are passing the element to it, now every item in the list will also receive its own element. So every item in the list view will get an instance from the message list. So now the first object of the message list is sent to the first item, to the first instance of the message bubble, and the second one to the second item. And that's how we have our list now rendering perfectly. But before I dive deeper, this looks ugly. So I want to actually add a padding to the message bubble, but I want it to be outside. So I can have a little space between the two instances inside the list view. So if I add a padding, and now, the order matters because I will keep it above the container. So it's actually outside the container. And I only want it to be, I think, to the bottom only. Yes. So I only want the padding to the bottom because we already have padding on the right and the left from the screen. And I don't want to also add a padding in the top. Okay, so now we want to add the logic that will add the text here that the user writes and creates a message object from it and add it to the list. But before we do that, remember we said that when you drop a text field, Nowa creates automatically a variable which is a controller of this text field. I just want to change its name. So instead of text, I want to call it maybe text controller. Okay. So now let's go to, let's select the button and scroll down to unpressed. So we add a logic to what will happen when the user click on this button. Okay, so now we have the circuit, and this is the starting point of the logic. So now if the user clicks on this button, now this event will fire. So now what I need to do is when the user click on the send button, I want to create an object from what user writes here and then add it to the list that we created before. And then I want to notify the screen that, hey, a new message was added to the list. So please update the view, which is the list view, to also show the recently added message. So to do that, first of all, you can click on the plus button here, or you can simply just right click on anywhere on the board. And I want to go to locals, and here is my list. Okay, now I want to add an object to the list. And now I can connect the add node to the onPressed. Okay, so now also for you to understand, the line here, the top white line, is the execution line. So which means that the first step is when the onPress happen, the add statement for the message list will be called. Okay? Okay, so what is the value here? It's exactly what we want to add to the message list. And since the message list from the type chat message object, the value here should also be from the same type. So we need to create, here you can click on general, create, and want to create an object from the type chat message object. And now since you can see that there's a green light, it's matching, so we can connect them because they are from the same type. So here with this node, we just created a new object from the chat message object. Okay, and now we can see here that there's a default, the default values for the parameters inside this object. But for the message, I want to take it from the text view, from the text field, sorry. So to do anything with the text field in Nowa, if you want to take the text, if you want to clear it up, you always use the controller that we talked about before. So, I changed its name to text controller. So I want to get the controller and I want to get the text property from it. So this one holds the text available inside the text field. And now, since the text is string and the message here is string, they have the red light and I can just connect them. Okay, great. Okay, so what's happening here is we are creating a chat message object, and inside this object we are passing the text from the text field as the message property inside. And by the way, here is user center. I always will keep it checked because in this case the message sent or the message added to the list is actually sent from the user. So I want always the check in this case to be true. Okay, so we created with this. Okay, just let me actually just zoom to the whole logic. And now, okay, we created the object, we are passed the data to it, we added it to the list. The last step is I want to notify the UI that something had changed in the variables. So now we added a new item to the list, to the variable, which is a message list here, but the UI it cannot know that something changed here until we notify it. And the way to notify it is by using refresh. So if you click on refresh, now you can simply say to the UI, hey, there is something changed in the variables, so please just take a look, see what happened, and then update yourself. So now if you click on play, okay, now so you can see that there's those two bubbles which are taken from the default value of the list. Now I don't want that. So usually you want to have the default value only when you want to test how it looked like on the UI. But now since it looks good, I don't need to have a default value, so I'm gonna just change it to 0. Okay, now let's play. If I say hey, if I click send, now I can see it here. If I say okay, what's up, I can also see it there. Okay, now we have some problems. The first problem is the order of the bubbles is weird. As a chat, I expect that it will come from the bottom, right? Not from the top. And the second thing is when I send a message, I expect the text field to be cleared. Okay, so let's actually fix those two problems. Let's start with something simple, which is the clearing up the text field. Okay, so let me resize this one. So to clear up the text field, again, you use the controller that is connected to that text field. So instead of taking the text as before, I will choose clear. And then I will add this here. Now be careful that you want to add it after adding the object to the list, not before. Because if you had this node before, you will clear up the text field before adding the value to the chat message object. Also, for you to understand how circuit work, now the line above is the execution line, and it just connects the event here to the statements. So now the add node is a statement because it does an action, it does something, it adds an object to the list. Here, the clear is also a statement. You do an action. You are clearing up the text in the text controller. But here, this part, it's not an action. It's an expression because this part just returns a chat message object with the message itself. It doesn't do something. It's not a statement. It's just an expression. It just returns something. This is why you cannot, like, if you connect this node here, nothing will happen because you're just creating an object, but I mean, you're not doing anything. But with the node like add, you are doing an action. With the node clear, you are doing an action. You are doing a statement. So just keep in mind that the statement nodes are the one you connect to the flow, which is the above white line, and the parts in the bottom, which are like those nodes, are expression nodes that the purpose of those nodes is only to return a value to the node you're using here as a statement node. Okay? Okay, so now we solved the first problem, that now the text field, yes, it's cleared up after we send a message. Now let's fix the location of the bubbles. So I want the bubbles to start from the bottom. So I can simply go to the UI and in the details panel, click on reverse. So reverse, what's going to happen is that instead of showing the items from top to bottom, it will show the items from bottom to up. So if we go again to play and we write, hey, now we see that the item is actually in the bottom. What's up? But here is something weird. So, okay, the items are rendered from the bottom, but the second message is above it. I don't want that. I want the second message to be below it, as a normal chat application. So to do that, I mean, the problem here is that we're using the add node, which is this one. So the add node, let me resize this. The add node adds the object always below the rest. So let's say if you have, now for the first, like the message, it's fine. For the second one, now because first of all, the list is reversed. So the first object is added in the bottom, but then the list adds the second message in the second location, and then the third message in the third location. But actually, what I want to do is I always want to add the message in the first location and push the others above. So to do that, instead of using the add, we use something called insert. So if you go again to the list, get the list, and use the insert. And then in the insert, get all the expression here and connect it to the value. And now I don't want the add anymore, so you can select it and then click on delete. And then I want to have the insert to be here. Okay, so now what happens now? So you are inserting, instead of just adding the chat message to be like the next one in the list, you always inserting the object in a specific location, which is defined in the index. So the list always start from 0. So when you say that you want to insert the item here in the 0 index, it means that you always want this list to be added in the top of the list. Okay, So now if you click on play, you click on, you say like, hey, and then you say like, what's up? You see, now it works. Why? Because the first time, for the first message, you just added the message, but for the second one, the inserted this object in the 0 location, which is like in the first of the list, and it pushed the other object below. And because the list is reversed, we're showing the index 0 in the bottom of the list instead of the top of the list. So now we have a normal working chat message. But I think I actually will face a problem now, because if I write something, it's like I'm gonna write a lot of text, like a long message, you'll see that, yes, the bubble, the height doesn't expand, and then this message becomes scrollable, but I don't want that. I want the bubble itself to be big if the message is long. So we only need to do a simple fix, because we didn't do anything to the layout before. Now it's the time to fix that. So for the markdown, instead of having a fixed height, let's have an auto height. So this will make the size, the height of the markdown, to be exactly as the size of the text inside. And because the markdown is inside the row, or the column, which is the bubble itself, now I want the height of the bubble to also be auto. Because be careful, if the markdown is auto, but the bubble itself is fixed in the height, then the bubble will not expand. The markdown is the only widget that will expand, but the bubble itself will not expand. So we need to have both to have an auto height. So when the markdown has like more stuff, it expands, and then because it expands and it's longer, by default the bubble itself, because its height is auto, it will also expand to cover the markdown. Because like the size of any widget when it's auto is taken from the children of it. So if the markdown has like a bigger height and the bubble is auto in height, then also the height of the bubble will be also bigger. So let's see now how it will look like. Hey, what's up? I'm gonna write a lot of lines just to test. And now, yes, now we can see that the height of the markdown expanded and the height of the bubble itself also expanded. But if we send a small message, the height will be small. So it will match exactly the size. Okay, amazing. So now the next step is, which is the part you're waiting for, is to connect this to ChatGPT. So let's see how to do that. So before we actually continue, I just noticed a small problem. So if you write a text, let's say with a long width, the bubble doesn't take the full width. But fixing this is actually very easy. So the only thing you have to do is go back again to the chat, the message bubble, choose the markdown widget, and then modify the width to be expanded. In this way, the width will expand to take the rest of the available space. So now if we come back again and let's write long text, you will see that it's taking the full width. And also, again, to check on the height, if you write a long text, I need to buy a new keyboard after that, then you will see that it's also taking the full height. So now, as a layout, it's perfect. But now the next step is, let's connect this baby to ChatGPT API. So to do that, first of all, you need to go to the reference of the OpenAI. You will see here that how the connection, or like how the structure should be. So before we do that, let's just now go back to the project and go click on the data source and choose an API. So here you will have the option to create a collection. I will call it OpenAI. So what's a collection? A collection is a collection of requests that usually they have the same base URL and they have the same headers. So for, let's say, OpenAI, for every request you do to OpenAI, there should be some header to like authenticate that who you are or you have access. And also the base URL will always be the same. So instead of you repeating those information for every request, you can group them together in a collection, and you need to put the header and the base URL only once, and then it will be way easy to create a lot of collections for the same base URL like OpenAI. But let's see this in action. So first of all, the base URL is the beginning part of this. So it's only like the first part of the link. So this is the base URL. Now, in order for you to be able to do requests to OpenAI, you need to have authentication key. And this authentication key or API key will let OpenAI know who you are. And also because before you do that, you need to charge your credits. So if you go to your settings in the account, in the platform.openai.com, you have a credit balance. And you need to be sure that you charge a little bit, like at least maybe $5, before you use the API Otherwise, you cannot use it because unfortunately, it's not for free to use the API, and you will be charged for every token. So do this first. Now, after you do that, you can now start actually implementing the request. So let's just take a look here on what is the request. So this is the base URL, okay? And this is the endpoint, which is chat completions, meaning that I need to complete a chat, which is like what I am trying to do with my app. Then there is the headers. You can see that because it has the /h. And the headers is like, it's not the main content, it's an extra information. Usually it's done for security, like passing the token or the key, and also to define the type of the content, like JSON, for example. And then goes here to the body, and this is like what you will send as the main content of the request. You will see that here you choose the model, and then you choose the message. So the message here is actually what it has two keys, the role and the content. So the role here is system, and the content is what will this system be. So here you will put your prompt to design the system. And then in the next object inside the message list will be the user. This is actually will be the message that the user of the app will send to OpenAI, which will use the system you put here to generate the response. If you didn't understand anything, it's fine. You will see that in action. So first thing first, let's actually create the key. So first of all, I'm gonna start putting the headers. So I'm gonna put the authentication, and also need to put the bring the key. So to bring the key, you need to go to your account, and from your account you will find a section called API keys. You can now click on this button to create a new secret key, and I will call it AI Chef Assistant, and I will create the key. Now, this is a secret key, so you need to be sure that you do not share this key with anyone. And this key will actually, every time someone uses key, it will charge on your account. So be careful to include this only inside your app and do not share it with anyone else. Let's go back here. Let's add the key. But if you look at the header, actually on the API, you will see that you need to include this part before the actual key. So don't do this mistake, because a lot of people doing this mistake. Include this, and also you need to have a space, and then you will have the key. This will include only like the type of the authentication. Anyway, I mean the authorization. Now let's add the second header, which is the content type. So content type, and will be application/JSON. Great. So now we created the collection. Now let's create an actual request, and I will call it send message. So this will be used to actually send message to ChatGPT. The first thing you will notice is that it's actually a post request, because you need to not just get data, you need to actually send data, which is a body, which we will see in a second. You will see that the base URL is already here, because this request falls under the same collection. And you don't need to put the header again here, because the header is also, all the headers are actually taken from the collection itself. All right, so what do we need to do now? We actually need just to come back again to the documentation and actually just copy paste the body. And the body is, as you can see, it's a JSON object. So you can have it here. Now let's start to fill the information here. First of all, choose a model. So if you go back to the documentation, you will see that you can actually see what models you have. If you go a little bit up, you will see here, click on this link, model endpoint compatibility. And for the endpoint, which is the completion, I can use one of those models. I can use ChatGPT-4, which will give me a better response, but it'll be a little bit expensive. Actually, let's just see here the comparison. So OpenAI just released ChatGPT-4o, which is like an enhanced model of ChatGPT-4 in terms of speed and cost. But it's not as good as ChatGPT-4 in doing complex tasks. Now you will see the price is $15 per million token, compared to for Turbo, which is $30 per million token. For 3.5 is only $1.5. So if your task is simple, I would rather choose 3.5 because it's cheaper and it's faster, and you just get the job done. So I will actually go for 3.5 Turbo. Or actually, I will go 4. I'm just gonna show you some stuff. So let's just go with 4 first. I will just come here and paste 4. Okay, the system. Now you will see that there's a message key which has a list. The list contains of 2 objects. The first one is the system. The second one is the user. For the system, what do you want the whole system to be? So I will say you are a chef assistant. I will give you something I crave, and you give me a simple and healthy way to do that. I don't need to spend a lot of time here. Of course, you can spend a lot of time to make it really good, but this is, for me, is enough for this example. I also need to add one part, is like reply only in markdown format. And this is because I want the reply to be markdown so I can actually render it in a nice way. Otherwise, it will only be text. Now, the user here is actually what the chat app will send. So if you go back to the design, the text that will be written here is actually what I need to inject here. So this will not be always hello. It will change with every message, depending on what the user sent. The system will always be like that for the full app, but for every request I will fire, I'll need to change this to include what the user of the app wrote. Because this changes and it's not fixed, it is a variable. So I will create a param, which is, a variable, but it's a variable that you can pass from outside, and I will call it message. Now you will see that the type of the param is string, which is what I need. Now I need to remove the hello and replace it with the message. To do that, just click on the $, and it will show you this list. Now here in the locals, I will find my parameter. Now here I see all the variables I can access inside this scope, but for me, like, what's most important is I want to access the message one, which is the one I created here. So now, perfect, the message will be here, and this is the system, and this is a model. Now I want to actually run a test. So I need to actually write something here. So like, I am craving a cupcake. This will be like a default response. And I will use this default response just to test the API. So if I click on run the test, wait, did not click run, okay. What happened? You're welcome to open the condition available. Interesting. What happened is I actually forgot to add the endpoint. That's why. All right, let's actually add the endpoint, which is version 1 completion. Again, okay, you need to add the slash here. Version 1 chat completions. Again, now let's run the test. All right, now it's loading. You will see that it takes time because you're using ChatGPT-4, and it actually needs a lot of time to actually give you a reply. You will see now if you change this to 4.0 or to even 3.5, the response will be way faster. But I just wanted to show you how to use ChatGPT-4. Oh my god, it's actually really slow. So I'm actually will change it definitely for 3. Actually, let's see the response. So this is the response. If you go inside choices, inside the message, this is the response. Sure, here's a recipe for healthy vanilla cupcake. Here's the ingredients, and here is the instructions. Wait, let me scroll down to make you see it. And you will see that actually it's in a markdown format as I want. Perfect. All is perfect now. Now, you can also, by the way, just make something extra. You can actually define the maximum tokens. So if you don't want users to like abuse the system, or I'm not gonna say abuse the system, but like have like a really long text and really long replies that will make you actually, it will increase the cost a lot. You can actually include a max token. So the entire token of the chat completion will not exceed this number, so you can control your cost a little bit. It's an extra thing, but for now I don't need to do that. So yeah, this is actually the reply, and now it works. And here you can see actually the generated model. So in the model, you will find like there is, let me regenerate the model, because the previous one was actually generated for the previous response when I actually forgot to include the completion. So it was only like one object. But here, after I regenerate, because I run the test again, it will look at this response and generate the whole models for me. So this will be the whole model that Nowa automatically generated, and you can actually use this model inside the circuit, as we will see in a bit. So last thing I'm gonna do is actually, I don't want to use ChatGPT-4 because I don't want to be broke, and I don't want my users to wait a lot. So I will actually use GPT 3.5 Turbo. Let's go back again, 3.5 Turbo, perfect. Let's run the test to be sure it's all good. And well, you can see that the response is actually faster, and let's see the response. Yeah, you almost got the same reply. So, I mean, for cooking recipes, you don't need to use ChatGPT-4 for that. All right, now the next step is actually using all of that inside the circuit, which is the logic editor. All right, so now we got the API defined already in the project. So what's the next step? The next step is asking yourself, when exactly do you want to fire that post request to send a data to the API? And the answer is when the user click on send. So when the user click here, I want to take whatever text he or she wrote and send it to OpenAI API, which is to ChatGPT. And then when I get the response, I want to render that response on the inside the screen. So let's actually do that. So let's open the circuit, and here you will see our little cute graph. So to recap what we're doing here, this is only for adding the message bubble when the user send a message. We are creating a chat message object. We are saying that this object is by the user. We are attaching the text from the text controller, which is the text field that we have here. You can see here the text controller. So we add the text from that controller to the object, and then we add the object to the list, which is the message list that we created for the screen here. And we inserting this object at index 0, so it actually renders on the bottom of the list, because as you remember, we reversed the list. So index 0 inserts that bubble in the end of the list. And then we are clearing up the text field, and then we refreshing, so we update the UI. So the chat bubble appears in the list, and also to make the text field, to clear the text field. Okay, so now if you go back to, if you right click and choose API, you will find the API you just created, which is send message. So when this node is executed, the API fires. So we can see here multiple things. One, the message is the parameter we created when we created the API. And here I will attach the message text that will be injected in the body of the API post request, as we saw just earlier. I hope that you did not forget that. And then you see here that you have two options. You have on value and on error. So on value is exactly what you want to happen when the API comes back with the response. On error is what to do when the API comes back with an error, like if there's no internet, if the API fails for some reason. So this is the node. So the question is, what do I want to connect here? The message, which I take from the text field. So I will take exactly what I did here and attach it here. So I'm gonna bring the text controller from the local, which is the variable that controls the text field, and I will take the parameter text from that object. this is the text that the user wrote, which is the same one here that I'm already adding to the list. So I will attach this to the message. And then when do I want this API to be fired? Actually, you can put it in multiple places, but I actually prefer to put it here. So what can happen here is I first will insert the message that the user sent to the list, and then I will fire the API, and then I will clear the text field so the user is able to send again without having to delete what he or she wrote before. All right, so the next step now is, of course, you can also have this node to be before insert. The order doesn't matter a lot here, because in the end, you will update the UI only when refresh node is called. So all of that will not make any change at the moment. It will all happen at once when you do refresh, which is set state in Flutter, if you know Flutter. All right, so send message here on value. Let's click on it and let's actually zoom up. So let's go back to the here. So here is on value. So here from this node, you can attach the nodes you want to execute when the API comes back with a value. And you can see that the value is actually here. So if you actually just grab a copy from the value and hover over the plus button, you will see that the type of this value is send message model. A good question is, what is send message model? So if you go back again to the API you just created, and remember when you run the test, so when you run the test, the platform automatically generated to you the model. So this is a model, and this is based on the response that Nowa got from the API. So it came as that. So there was like a send message model in the top, there was an ID object. To be honest, there's also the model, but you don't care about all of that. I actually care about one thing only, which is the content, because this content is what holds the text that will come back from ChatGPT. Okay, if you don't remember, I will remind you again by just running a test. So if I run a test, here you will see it's loading, and there's a response. You see, all of that is actually added inside the send message model. You can see the ID, you can see the object, you can see the model, which is already generated here. And if you click on choices, click on the first item, click on message, and then in content, you will see the response from ChatGPT, which is the choices, the message, the content. And that's what I want to get in the circuit. So let's go back to the circuit. So this is the model. If you click here, I want to bring choices. What is choices? Oops. Choices is this list. And then I want to bring, this is how ChatGPT replies. This is the structure they use. So we don't need to think about it a lot. Just, decide what you want to take from here, and that's it. So it always comes back as a list for some reason, and you always need to get the first item in the list. So I want to get the first item. So you can actually, I actually choose set by mistake. Oops. All right, let's try again. So get the value, and then I want to get the choices, and then in choices I want to get item, and the index is 0. If you go back to the API, the index is 0, the one you want to take from the list. And then I want to get the message object, and in the message object I want to bring content. And if you hover here, you will see that content is string. So perfect. Now this, I want to add it to the list of the main list I have here. And again, if you want to add anything to the list, the way to do it is to add an object to the message list. And the message list is an object of chat message object. So to be able to add that response, you need to take your time, create a chat message object, and the message of that object is the response that will come from here. And then you want to insert
this object to the list, which is this one. So again, the same way as we did when the user sent the message, you do the same thing when ChatGPT replies with a response. So you go to locals. So here you access the local variables. Here is a message list. I want to get the object, and I want to insert an object. And the value, which is what the list accepts, is chat message object. So you need to create a chat message object so you can connect it to or insert it to the list. So now what do I have? I took the response from the API. I went all deep to get the content, which is the response itself. I added that response to a chat message object, which I created before to just like put every message in that kind of envelope. And this envelope has two information: the message itself and a boolean to say that if this message is from the user or from ChatGPT. And in this case, I want to uncheck this box because this message is from ChatGPT. It's not from the user. Okay, why do I need to do that? Because later I will use this value to determine some stuff in the UI. We will see that. Also, you saw that the title of the bubble changes already depending on this boolean. All right, and then we're inserting this object to the list. So the list will have multiple objects. Objects created by the user, which was created in the circuit before, and object created from ChatGPT, which is created when ChatGPT replies back. All right, and then the last thing you need to do is to refresh so the UI actually updates. But we have a good question here, which is, do I actually need to add refresh here? The first thing you have to know is that you need to add refresh every time you change anything in the UI and you want the UI to update. Here, I'm adding an object to the list, and this list is connected to the list view here, so it affects the UI. So for me to tell the UI that, hey, something has changed, I need this refresh node. But the question becomes that I already have a refresh node in the circuit when the user click on the button, which is here. Do I also need to add a refresh inside here, inside on value? And the answer is yes and no. So actually, to be on safe side, you need always to add refresh inside, because this is an async function. It means that when Nowa get to this node, it start executing it, but it will not wait until the ChatGPT replies back. It will start sending the message, and it will automatically continue here without having to wait from this node to end. Now, the function that will automatically be called when this is done and the response is back is the on value. So what can happen that if you send a message to ChatGPT and ChatGPT, the API, took a time to get the message and reply back, but as we said here, that this node is an async, so it doesn't wait. So Nowa will continue to clear the text and continue to refresh the UI, and maybe it will do that before ChatGPT replies with a response. So if this happened and ChatGPT replies with a response after refresh has been called, then the UI will not update. Now, if ChatGPT replied back quickly before refresh is called, then it will update. So because you don't want to be in this maybe situation, you add it here because at least you are sure that the on value here will be called after the response is back. And in case it was called after a while from the end of the previous circuit, at least you're sure that here you're calling refresh again, so it will update again the UI. All right, let's actually now see what can happen. If you click on play and you say, hey, how can you help me? Help me. And click on send. You wait a little bit, and here we are. Sure, just let me know what are you craving, and I can suggest a simple and healthy way to satisfy that craving. This came from ChatGPT, and you can see that actually it came fast because we're using ChatGPT 3.5. Great, so we got the main purpose. Also notice that the response is always was inserted in the right place because we're inserting the object in index 0. And I want now to suggest, what am I craving for? Let me think. I'm actually craving for an Italian sweet. So the user only need to type that. And since you entered in the prompt the details, it automatically will suggest something healthy and simple. You don't need to include healthy and simple in the text. So homemade roasted, but I don't even know what is that. I'm not gonna even try to read it. Balsamic. Okay. Anyway, for strawberries, a tablespoon of vinegar. Maybe I need to try this meal, this sweet, after the recording. Anyway, going back to work. So we got the message here, we got the bubble, everything is perfect. But now let's play a little bit with the UI to make it actually look a little bit better than this. All right, so we already implemented the full logic for the app. Now, what I want to do is to make the app look a little bit better. And to be honest, we can do a lot of that by only improving on the appearance of this bubble. So I have a lot of ideas, but let's just see if my ideas will make any difference. Now, the first thing I want to do is to change the radius of the bubble. So just choose the message bubble, and on the right side, I want to change the radius to make it 20. Well, this is already an improvement, right? Don't you agree? Okay, but now I want to do something else. So you know that in some chat apps, sometimes the radius here, like on the left side or the right side, changes according to who sent the message. So I want to do the same thing. So it kind of indicates that this bubble came from the right side or the left side. So let's actually see this in action. The first thing I want to do is I want to actually have control over the 4 corners. So before, you have one radius for all the corners, but if you click on that button, you will have control over every single corner. You will have here the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. All right. So what do I need to do now? So if the user send the message, I want the bubble to look like this. I want the bottom left to be 0, and this is how it look like. So it seems like the bubble came from the left side. If the message came from ChatGPT, what I want to happen is I want the bottom right to be 0. Okay, that's a kind of challenging thing, right? Because now you need to pass different values for this property according to some logic. So how do you do that? Please, I hope that you have the answer, because we did this before with compute. So when you do compute, you actually attaching a logic to this property. So instead of having a fixed value like 20, you can return a dynamic value that will change according to the logic. So let's do that. So click on the bottom left, click on compute, and then you can open the logic in circuit. So by default, you will see the logic that was already in the field before you create the callback or the function, which is I was always returning 20, but I don't want that. So I want to have a condition, and condition always means if statement. So according to some condition, I want to return different values. So here, instead of having return to be on this execution line, which means that it will always be executed, I wanted to attach it to else, and I also want to have another return node to then. So now, instead of having a node to be always executed, I have 2 nodes. This will be executed when the condition is true, because it's connected to then, and the other one will be executed when it's false, because it's connected to else. All right. So what is a condition? Remember before what we did when we created the object, which is chat message object. I just want to remind you, that's it. So I'll go back again to the logic. Remember we said we created this parameter, which is user sender, and this will hold if the user was a sender, remember? And then for the bubble, remember we created a parameter called chat message param from that type, and by default have that, if the user sender, but we created a parameter that will hold a value of type chat message object for every bubble instance in the list. And to remind you also that in the logic, what we did is if we add the object from the user, we already set this on true. And if we add the logic from the API response, which is here, we always set the value on false. So this means that we need to use that value to actually estimate or know if the message was from the sender from the user or from ChatGPT. All right, so going back again to the logic, you need to click on locals. So here you access the local variables from the place where you are. And now we are inside the message bubble component. And here I can see the parameter I created, which is chat message param. This will hold the chat message object that was sent for that specific bubble. Because remember, in the list you have multiple bubbles, each bubble have a different chat message object, and every chat message object is received by the parameter chat message param. And inside the param, since if you hover, you will see that it's from the type chat message object. So if you click on plus, you will see the boolean is user sender, and this will return a boolean, and the condition needs a boolean, so we are already set. So if you connect it, we have this condition. So now it says that if the message bubble, if the user was a sender of this message bubble, then I want the value to be 0 on the bottom left and 20 on the bottom right. So let's see. Now you will see that now it's automatically had 0 on the bottom left. Why? Because the default value was that the message is from the user. If you change that, you will see that it goes away. But let's actually keep it. So actually I just noticed that the right side is always 0, but I don't want that. Let's already create the logic for the right side. So instead of it always be 0, let's also create a function. And we will do the exact opposite here. So I will have if statement, I will have 2 return nodes. I'll click one here and one here. I will use the same condition, which is from the locals. I will give the parameter is user sender connected to the condition. And then if the user is a sender, what I want to do on the bottom right is that I want to keep the value 20, else I will want to make it 0, which means that the sender was the ChatGPT. We'll just go back. So now you see now here the message is coming. I mean the radius on the bottom left is 0 because the default value of the parameter says that the sender is the user. And if you change that, you will see that now the text became assistant and the corner also changed. Now it's on the right side. If you click on play, I'll be like, hey, what's up? You will see that on my message, the bubble came from the left side because this corner on the left it had a 0 radius. And the opposite happened when the message came from the assistant. Amazing. Actually, one extra thing you can do, if you don't want to just keep changing the default value, because a default value is a default value. You don't need to keep changing it to see how it looks like in the UI. So I will want always a default value to be is user sender, but instead of playing with the default value, you can do something else. So here in the details panel, you can always pass a dummy object to the parameters just to see how it looks like in the UI. So if I click on plus here, then instead of the bubble taking the default value of the parameter, it will take this value. And this value is not stored in the code. It's not stored in your project. It's only for the board. So you see how the UI will look like in different states. So if I change this one to be like, hey, it will change here. If I change the boolean, it will change. So I can do that. I can see how it look like in different status without having to play with the default value, because default value, it's not a good practice to play with it. But if you want always to be back to the default value, just click on the minus, move the object, it will go back to the default value. Anyway, that was a nice trick, right? But let's actually now continue on the improvements we wanted to do. So another improvement is that I want the color of the bubble, the background color, to actually be different. So instead of having this really depressing color, you know, the gray one, I actually want to have different colors for actually the user and also for the assistant reply. So again, what we're gonna do, instead of having one fixed color, we want to change it. So again, the same situation applies here, that we need to create a function. So click on color, click on compute, and then you have the function, open it in circuit, and as you saw, it always return this color. But I want to choose again if statement. I think now you saw this multiple times, so you should be comfortable with doing that. So quickly, I'm gonna just build the same logic. So I'm gonna bring the parameter of the bubble, if the user was a sender, connected to the condition, and then I need to return different colors depending on if the user was a sender or no. And the colors, because I have a designer, so I have to actually use their colors, otherwise I will be in a big trouble. So I have the colors in a text editor here. So this is the color if the user was a sender. So I will just paste it here. And this will be the color if the reply came from ChatGPT. Amazing. All right. So let's see that. So you will see now, because the default value is that the user is a sender, that this color changes. I mean, just the color changes to the color that we wanted. But let me add an object to see. And let me just change this. So now, if you change that, what you notice is the color changed, the text changed from the user to assistant, and the radius of the border also changed. So now we can see how it looked like in different cases. Okay. Actually, one thing I want to do is play a little bit with the text here. So let me make it a little bit bigger. Let me also make it bold. Let me maybe change the color a little bit. Maybe like that. And also I want, you know what? I want the icon to be before the text. So we'll go back to the logic I created before. And instead of the icon being in front, I will put it in the back. And instead of user, I will just say you. So, because I'm now talking to the user itself. So, all right. Now, if you click on sender and you change the Boolean, you will see how the message will look like in different cases. Let's click on play and see that in action. Hey, what do I crave now? I am okay, you know what? I will see what I have. I have eggs, chocolate, and what someone can have in their house so they can make an easy recipe. Egg, chocolate, and milk. So let's see what's the reply gonna be. All right, chocolate milk. Okay, that was very simple. But now you see how the bubble looks different from you and from the assistant. So I actually want to do one last improvement. If I really care about the UX, I have a small problem that when I send a message, like if I say, hey, how can you help me? And I click send, there is some time I need to wait until the API replies back with a response. But in that time, I kind of need to show the user that there is a loading status. So the user will not think that there is a problem happened in the app. So when I click on send, if you notice here, you will have like few seconds until, I mean, not few seconds, even less, until you get the response. But even though sometimes if the model having a high load or if the response took longer, you always want to be on the safe side in the user experience area. So I can do that in multiple ways. The simplest way to do is when I send a message, instead of keeping the text to be sent, I can show 3 dots to indicate that it's loading until the response comes back. This is the easiest and the fastest way to solve this problem. But also, I can do other things. Like, for example, I can use the circular progress indicator and switch the button to be this indicator while the app is waiting for the response. And I can do that using a widget called crossfade. Crossfade allows you to have 2 widgets and switch between them according to a condition. But I don't want to do this right now. I want to do the simplest way possible for this problem. So I don't need the loading indicator. So the first thing is, I want to know if the state of the app now is kind of loading or waiting, or it's not. So because of this, I need to create a variable in the screen. And the variable I can say is loading. And this variable is Boolean. So this will indicate, if this is true, it means that the app is waiting for the response from the API. If it's false, then it's not the case. And by default, I want it to be false. By default, it's not waiting or it's not loading, but then later I can change it. So this Boolean will be true if I am waiting to get a response from the API, and otherwise it will be false. So the next question is, where do you want to use this variable in the UI? And the question is here in the bottom. And as we did before, remember that we said that here I have 2 states, either send or I want to keep it like 3 dots. And since I want 2 different values, depending on some logic, again, what we need to do is to use the function compute. So I'm going to bring it back to send and then click here and click on compute. Now I have a function here. Let's open it in circuit. Now you should be an expert in doing the compute function. So now I want to use the if statement, of course, again. And the condition is if the variable is loading is true or false. So if now the state is loading, I want to return 3 dots. So return 3 dots. Otherwise, I just return send when this Boolean is false, meaning that I am not waiting for anything. Amazing. The last step is switching or setting the value of this variable. And I want to do this when the user click on send. So the moment the user click on send, I need to set the variable is loading to be true. And the moment I get the response from the API, I need to set it back to be false. That's it. So let's go back again to the logic. And all right, so the first thing is I want to bring the variable, which is loading, or you can find it inside the locals category. And I want to set the value, not get the value, I want to set because I want to change it. And so here, as soon as the user click on the button send, I actually want to keep this variable to be stay connect, to keep it true. So now what happens is, as soon as the user click on the button, the loading will be true. Now, can I have this node to be here? Yes. You can have this node to be anywhere, okay, before the refresh, because when the refresh is called, it will update the UI. So whatever change you do before, it will all happen at the same time when you call refresh. Because in the meantime, when the execution is still here or here, the UI still didn't update. So it doesn't matter if you put is loading here or even if you put is loading just before the refresh, in the end, it will be updated in the same time. Okay, but of course you have to be sure that when you change anything in the UI, like if you change any variable that is connected to the UI, that the execution always need to end with refresh. If this one was not in the end, the UI will not know that something had changed, and therefore the UI will not update. So now inside send message here, I want to do something else, which is I want now to set the, set is loading. I need to set this loading to be false. So after I get the response here from the API and I insert it in the list, the last thing I want to do is to set the loading to be false. And of course, there is already refresh in the end. Again, it doesn't matter if you set it here or if you set it here as well. In the end, the refresh here will be called and it will update the UI when the whole execution of this section, which calls on value, that will be executed when the response is back, will be happen in, like, the refresh of the UI will happen in the end. I think you got it at this time. All right, so now let's give it a try. If you click on play, you say, hey, how can you help me? Click on send, you see the 3 dots? There is this very little moment when there is a 3 dots that indicates that it is loading. You can actually do also more things. You can disable clicking when it's loading, so the user will not be able to even click. You can, as I said before, you can use the loading indicator. So there is multiple ways that you can offer a solid user experience for your users. Amazing. So now we actually have the full app as we imagine. And now I actually can just start asking it for some recipes. So give me something simple I can do using the gradients available. Gradients available in every house. So let's see what the response will be. Now you see it's loading and then you get a recipe. I want a different one. Click on send. And then you will have another reply with another recipe. Roasted sweet potato. Oh, that's actually nice. So now we have it all set. We have the bubbles, we have the chat, all is nice. Now you saw, and hopefully you can build your own fully customized chat app that uses AI. And what you can go from here, actually, there's multiple ideas. You can implement authentication, so you can enable every user to log in. You can save the chat for every user in a database, and you can use API, you can use Firebase, you can use Firebase. And also, you can actually have a way for users to just save the recipes that they like, so they can actually, in the app, get access to those recipes. Or it doesn't have to be recipes. You can just maybe build your custom GPT and train it on your own data, whether it's like company data or product data. And then you can build this chat app to the people who, or the stakeholders or that's interested to use that custom GPT. And then you can actually customize it the way you want. So this was the basics of the app. Hopefully in coming videos, we're gonna make it even more advanced. We can add some stuff on it. Please let us know how it was, what was easy, what was not easy. What are you trying to build? Because we can actually personally help you with the apps that you're trying to build. All right, so whiteboard time. Now I will try to explain what happened in a nutshell. So first thing first, we created 2 main UI elements. We created the screen itself, and the screen mainly had a list view widget, and on the other side we created a chat message bubble. So This will present a chat message bubble, and it's a component we created that we show inside the list. And really below here, we created a model called chat message object. And this model was made to present every single chat message. So it's an envelope that will hold every message. And it had mainly two information. It had the message itself as a string, and it had a boolean called is user sender, so I can know if this message came from the user or from ChatGPT. Okay, now we need to have a list to store the list of the messages, or like the history of the chat. So we created something called a message list. So we created here a message list, and this was a variable in the screen, and this variable was a list of chat message object. Means that this list will store multiple instances or copies from chat message object. Every copy or every instance is or every object, let's say, is or presents a single chat. Now, to be able to render the list on the list view, we need to connect the list to the list view using the property called children. So by choosing the message list to be the children of the list view will render the items of the message list. So if we have here, let's say 3 items in the message list, which is like 3 messages, the list view will render 3 items. But the problem is that the chat message object, which is the main type of data inside the list, is not a UI. So to be able to for the list view to render a UI, we need something called a placeholder. So what we did is we choose the chat message bubble as the placeholder for the list view, meaning that for every item in the list, which is a chat message object, the list view will render an instance of the component chat message bubble. Okay, so if we have here 3 items, the list view will render 3 instances of chat message bubble. But inside the bubble, I need to show the text here, which is the message. I also need to do some logic depending on if the message came from the user or from ChatGPT. So I need to get the instance or the object, the chat message object from the list for every single instance of the chat message bubble rendered inside the list view. So for that, we saw that the list view automatically sends something as a local variable called element. And this element is from type chat message object because this element presents the element inside the list that was passed to that instance of the chat message bubble. And this is why the element is from the type chat message object. Now, the problem here is I don't have a way to accept this variable so I can use it inside the bubble. That's why we created here something called chat message param. And this was a parameter created inside the chat message bubble component. And this parameter was of type chat message object, which is the same type of the element. So because of this, I could now accept the element for every single chat message bubble. And then if I want to do anything inside the UI of the chat message bubble, I will just have to use the chat message param. So if I want to connect the markdown widget to the message inside, which is like if I want to show the message itself inside the bubble, then I will just use the chat message param dot message. So when I did this, when I connected the markdown to chat message param .message, I could render the message that arrived to that instance of chat message bubble using the param, because the param is connected to the element, which is the item from the list that was passed to that bubble. And then also I could do other things using the boolean is user sender. So I could define the color of the bubble, and I also could do and change the bottom left and the bottom right radius if the sender was the user or ChatGPT using the boolean is user sender. And to access that boolean again, what I did is I used the param. So from here, from inside the bubble, the only thing you have access to is the param. And the param, which is the item of the chat message object for that bubble, has the information you need for the message itself for that bubble. All right, so this was how everything was connected. Now let's see the scenarios. So the scenario, the first one is when the user simply just send a message. So when the user sends a message, what happens is we create an object from scratch of type the chat message object. And then the next step, we insert this object to the message list. And then we ask the UI to refresh. And remember, we insert the object in index number 0. So it's rendered as the first item in the list, and we also flip the list, as you remember. So this is how we, this is the finished scenario when the user sends a message. Now, when ChatGPT replies back and when the API request fires back, which happens in the section called onValue, meaning that the API came with the response successfully, then we do the same thing. We create a new object, we insert that object to the list, and then we call again refresh. So, but the only difference between the both scenarios is that when we create a chat message object, when the user sends the message, we check this box is user sender and we make it true. But for the logic that is built inside onValue, when we create a new object of chat message object, we set is user sender to be false. And this is how we just store the objects. Each one will have their own Boolean value, if it's from the user or it's from ChatGPT. And then above here in the logic you have in the bubble, it just automatically handles, or as you already built it, it handles those both scenarios. That's all. I know that my drawing is not the best, but I hope that the idea is now very clear. Please, if you have any other question, if you have anything you stuck at, please let us know, and we're going to be really happy to help you get your app out.